Welcome to ISAT 211, Issues in Modern Production Systems. This is the lecture 11, Sustainable Manufacturing. So today we're going to talk about a little bit of theory base for what is, sustainable manufacturing, what are the concepts in it, and then we'll go through how to practice sustainable manufacturing in production companies. And lastly, we're going to discuss social sustainability. First, let's look at what is sustainability in manufacturing systems. As we know that in different areas, people might define sustainability differently. United Nations has its own sustainable development definition. Well, in production companies, mostly people are looking at three pillars of manufacturing of sustainability: economic, environmental, and also social. And those kind of three. You can look at it three pillars for sustainability. For example, we call it triple bottom line, or we can look at sustainability in these three aspects, more like those circles, right, with a certain overlap. If we are trying to achieve a sustainable development in production companies or practices in production companies, we may want to look at something in the middle of here, right? So that takes care of all three aspects: economy, environment, and also society. Well, another way to look at is this is in the middle. This is our economic activities, but also these economic activities are within the society, and all these societal activities are also within the environment, ecological system, right? So these are different ways to look at these three aspects of sustainability, and they all function in order to achieve more of a environmental friendly, lower cost, and also to take social responsibilities. And how? So this is the IPAT equation, or the master equation, to calculate the total impact on the environment of human activities. And this equation is defined as population times affluence, which is GDP per capita, times the technology, which is the impact per dollar of GDP. And there are, in this equation, there are three variables: population, affluence, and also technology. From the history perspective, we can see that population is actually always going up, right? Well, some countries you may see different curve, but in general trend, the population with civilization development is always going up, and then this affluence, GDP per capita, is also going up. So the only variable that we can use, or we can do to reduce the total environmental impact on the earth, is actually on the technology. So this is where industrial sustainability analysis or system manufacturing can do to make a difference on the total environmental impact on the earth. And in order to practice sustainability, or we have to understand how we look at a product, and it's the product life cycle. And we can look at a product, from its very beginning, its material extraction. For example, if we are making a car, then we may need some metal sheets, right? Those metals can be aluminum, can be steel. But where do we get all these materials? It's from the earth, right? Originally from the earth, which means there's a material extraction stage in the product life cycle. Is the very beginning, and then these iron ores will be processed to make some certain metal sheets or steel sheets, right? These steel sheets will be made in the material processing facilities. So these facilities are typically those steel making companies or factories. And then after that, the steel sheets will be sent into the manufacturing, where the cars are made. And then after you make the car, then it will be distributed to distributors, and then give us sell it to the users. Then your users, after you use it, you can either recycle it or dispose it to the landfill or some other places, or you can do remanufacturing, right, to send it back to the factory and then to make a new product, or you can reuse to sell your car to another person and then to make it a secondhand car, and or you can just keep driving it, over and over again. So this is a typical product life cycle, including all these 5 stages. And why do we want to look at a product from this life cycle perspective? Why don't we not just look focusing on the manufacturing itself? Well, in order for you to for us to understand the environmental impact or understand the how to improve the total, for example, life cycle carbon emissions, or the impact on the earth, we have to look at how this product actually goes through in this whole product life cycle or on this earth, right, from the beginning to the end. And so that's why a lot of times the solutions can be actually be generated more innovatively from understanding of its product life cycle. And you can watch this this video to have a better idea of how these how these practices can be generated using life cycle thinking. System thinking, because sustainability is a really complex problem. It includes a lot of things. Think about if you have a factory, right? You have to take care of the quality issues. You have to take care of the profit. You have to look at the cost of production, and then also there are environmental regulation policies, and also there are corporate social responsibilities you have to take, and all these things are related to the cost, right? And how are they related, right? Does it mean that you do a lot of environmental practices that it's a higher cost for you and it will reduce your profit margin? Not necessarily, because there are a lot of relations in between, and that's why using system thinking, understand its interconnections, and also the consequences of certain solutions may be a good way to understand your system and then come up with solutions to generate more profit or benefit of your production. And sustainable manufacturing, there can be different definitions. I think the Department of Commerce have given its definition, and also different scholars may have given definition themselves. So the definition I give for sustainable manufacturing back in 2013 is it's a set of systems activities for the creation and provision of manufactured products that balance the benefits for ecological systems, social system, and economic systems. And here, a focus here is actually the balance the benefits. So we're not trying just to look at the environment itself, and now just to look at social responsibility. Instead, we want to achieve a balanced benefit of the whole system by balancing the interests of the three pillars of sustainability in manufacturing companies. And well, if you want to come up with certain solutions for improving sustainability of production companies, and or even generate benefit by doing this, we first need to understand where are these environmental impacts, and how do we do those. And there are different methods. For example, life cycle assessment is to use is a tool to help you to define what is the environmental impact per product or per functional unit, and then define what is the scope are you trying to look at or assess, and compile all these energy consumption and materials, and generate and calculate the environmental impact based on the consumptions of their processes. Economic input and output, LCA is trying to look at the environmental impact from the input and output perspective. What is coming into your factory and what's coming out of the factory. And hybrid LCA is kind of using kind of both, right? Economic and environmental, and also life cycle assessment way. Another one is using materials flow analysis. So for example, in your production company on your shop floor, there are multiple processes, and for each process, you mark out what are the inputs for each of the flow, what are the input and output for each of the process. And then from here, from this, material flow map, you can track how these materials resources actually flow within your factory, and using this to calculate the environmental impact. So there are different tools, analytic tools to evaluate or assess the environmental impact. Well, for economic sustainability, and there are multiple ways. A common way to calculate that is a cost-benefit analysis. The cost means where are these cost items, right? Operation cost, material cost, human labor cost, a bunch of those, and also the benefit. You have the revenue, you minus cost, and you got the benefits, right? And using this in the cost and benefit, you can figure out if certain projects are feasible, how much margin, how much how much benefit you can earn from each of the projects. And also another one is the life cycle costing. Life cycle costing is mostly looking at either a product or equipment with certain typically physical products. Sometimes you can look at a project as well. Project can, you can evaluate the cost of the project from its core at the very beginning of this stage until at the wrap up of your project. And lastly, it's the social sustainability. And one method to do that is called social LCA, or social life cycle assessment. So United Nations developed a framework for evaluating social life cycle assessment. We're going to talk about this concept later. Then, along the product life cycle, how do we practice sustainable manufacturing in a factory? First, we can look at this life cycle from its raw materials. Well, we can think about, okay, what raw materials we can use. Do we need metal versus plastic versus some other ceramics or some other materials? Which one is more environmental friendly, right? And then from the material to the factory, then you can look at, okay, within the factory, well, what can you do, right? And there are multiple ways you can practice sustainability. And later on, we're going to look at it 6R to do that. And then there's also delivery stage. So delivery or transportation, and you think about different ways, right? By truck, by air, or by ships. Which one will be more economic, right? Or environmental friendly? And then same with distribution to our sellers or the users, and how do you use? And these are also ways we can look at to reduce the total environmental impact of the life cycle. Think about its car, right? If it's a car, when you use, you can use it in a more economic way, or more environmental friendly way, or you can use it as and it consumes a lot of energy. So and then lastly is dispose, right? Do you want to recycle them, or do you want to put in the landfill of your products? So along the product life cycle, you can think other ways. Even though maybe you're only at the manufacturing stage, all right, you can still to do a lot of things. For example, you think about what is the material you can use, and maybe redesign the product to do so. Right, these are the three, all different stages. Well, next, if you are on the shop floor, what can we do to practice sustainability? And one way is to do the housekeeping. Housekeeping is basically to improvements in work practices and the maintenance. So basically to look at where are these wastes, right, and reduce all these wastes, because those wastes can be directly related to the environmental impact. And process optimization, the same. You can look at how do you make your process more efficient. Optimization can be looking at the process time. Maybe you can reduce the processing time, or reducing the use of materials, needs all these processes, right? Or do 5S to manage them, to reduce the waste. And also, we can look at raw material substitution. So basically, to look at if there are some more environmental friendly materials we can use instead of using material that generate a lot of emissions or cause a lot of impact on the environment. And next is, we may look at some new technologies, right? And that some new technologies may use less energy, or generate less emissions and also waste. Right? And another way to look at it is the design. From the design perspective, maybe you can redesign some part of a product, or even entire product to look at if some part of the design is really necessary, right? And maybe you can reduce the material use, and to make your product be more environmental friendly, because design actually has a huge impact on its product life cycle. Right? Think about it, originally the product is made of metal. Now you're going to change it to the plastic, then there may be more environmental impact generated from it, right? And or you want to replace it with the wood, then there's also a lot of difference in environmental impact. So that's why I would say design is a very important stage in in determining the environmental or sustainability performance of their product. So here I gave some examples that you can see how people do housekeeping, process optimization, the raw material substitution, and also new technology, product design when practicing sustainable manufacturing. Another way to practice sustainability on the shop floor is to use the 6R methods. 6R means recycle, reuse, recover, reduce, redesign, and remanufacturing. And you can figure out ways to by looking at or evaluate your manufacturing activities and see where you can do recycle, right? Convert waste into more reusable materials, right? For example, if you create a lot of scraps, then you can collect all these scraps and then send it to recycling center. You may also generate a little bit money, get a little money back from doing that. And also reused, which means that extend the product life cycle by changing its ownership, secondhand, reuse of the car, or reuse some of the parts in your factory, reuse some of the equipment in your factory can also be done to reduce your not only environmental impact but also the cost, right? And recover means retrieve valuable substances from end of life materials, and reduce means reduce waste, material consumption, energy consumption. We already talked about that in the prior slides. Redesign means you can not only the product but also the process and system itself. You can redesign them to for better sustainability performance. And next one is the remanufacturing. So which means that some of the parts of the product actually can be processed to be like new parts, right? And this is also the good way to save those materials for lower your environmental impact and also the cost, as they are all related. When I'm doing research or when I practice sustainability or sustainable manufacturing, I always look at the whole manufacturing system or whole enterprise at 3 different levels. One is enterprise level, so which means they do a lot of administration work. Usually that is the office area, for example, marketing, human resource, administration, sales, all these, and there can be material consumption and also energy consumption, right? Materials can be related to maybe the paper, the equipment used, the printer, computers. Well, the energy can be, the lighting, the using of the equipment, like computers, and all these. And the shop floor, similarly, you can look at what are the material consumption on the shop floor, what are the what are the energy consumption on the shop floor. Shop floor level usually deals with the whole manufacturing processes, right? It's a process flow from the very beginning, where you receive all these raw materials, to the shipping, right? Shipping out the products. So this the whole process is called a shop floor level. Another one is operation level, so which means that is unit process. Think about it as a CNC machining center, and look at how can you practice sensibility at that level. You can evaluate the machine, energy consumption. Maybe you can redesign the operation, so so to reduce the energy consumption from the machine, right? So when you're looking at the 3 different levels, the practices are typically different, but they all can aggregate or be related for these processes. So the last point I want to talk about in this lecture is about social sustainability. And social sustainability is actually can be it's very related topic that most people really care when when I go to a factory, and you may look at, okay, or how do you feel in during the work? It's not just the employee's perspective; it's also from the product's life cycle, consumers' perspective, right? Consumer can also feel comfortable of using their products, right, or is willing to pay or feel that your product is taking responsibility for society, and so that's how that's why a lot of factories looking at social sustainability as part of their major jobs. And first, what is corporate social responsibility? Basically, it's a concept whereby companies integrate social and environmental concerns in their business operations, in their interaction with stakeholders on a voluntary basis, right? So that's a common concept that was defined in 2006 by the EU communication. And there are different agencies that have developed their framework of how to look at social sustainability for companies. For example, UNEP, United Nations, and develop a framework. It look at the social sustainability from 5 perspectives: workers, consumers, local community, society, and also value chains. Right. For example, we have some local factories. If a local factory, you okay, maybe you're hiring local workers, and you benefit the local community, by have some outreach. And also maybe you invite K-12 students or local universities coming to our projects, or for tours, and all these different, or charity, all these we can look at how we actually benefit the local community, and also the workers, right? The company can create really friendly or safe environment, a working environment for their employees. And that is for the workers. And consumers means the products or the service you generated. How does that actually takes social responsibility? And society, how your company actually can benefit society, and also your stakeholders, right? Value chain actors, your suppliers, your customers, your maybe your shareholders. And global reporting initiatives, so the GRI is another agency that actually they provided guidelines on how to report social sustainability for companies, and they look at those 4 aspects: labor practices, human rights, society, and also product responsibility. So this is another one. These are the two common guidelines or frameworks. And so if you get into a little bit detail about social impact categories of UNEP framework, you can see there are these categories like freedom of association, child labor, fair salary, working hours, forced labor, equal opportunity, healthcare, health and safety, and also social benefits. And these are from the worker perspective, right? Think about how all these other different aspects or perspective, the consumer, society, all those. You can develop other impact categories. But this is for the worker that defined by UNEP. And a few years ago, our colleague and I developed 12 dimensions for the worker on the manufacturing shop floor, corporate social responsibility as well. And these are 12 dimensions to evaluate, how the company actually treat their workers, or develop their workers' well-being. So these are 12 dimensions like compensation, physical and mental safety, and demand, variety of tasks and rules, social interactions, and all of those, autonomy and growth and personal development. And so when you are, for example, if you are a manager or engineer or even owner of a business, maybe you can look at all these 12 dimensions and think about how your company does, on these 12 aspects of social responsibility. Similarly, you can develop, your own metrics or find out the metrics that are related to you to report your social responsibility for other perspectives. All right, so that's all for this lecture.